Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today.
Unless you broaden your own horizons and learn from difference, you will be restricted by the exposure, knowledge, expertise in your own field. I got to know that it is more about engagement and interface with people than it is about the forms that you fill in. For me, the most critical part of any project is the definition document. But unless you get that right, the rest will go wrong. You have to be, as an organisation, mature enough and ready enough to take on a project management office, because they are going to tell you things that you do not want to hear. Actually, if you can't even sort of completely swallow the looking at it yourself, you're going to struggle when the external people come in.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. Hey folks, before we get into today's episode, just wanted to introduce you once again to our mobile application, Drillbook. Now, if you listen to the podcast, you're probably the sort of person that likes to develop themselves. Now, Drillbook is built to be the home of training ideas for drill grounds all across the world. It's a library of content built by firefighters for firefighters. It's for training ideas, it's for incident debriefs, radio messages. We've got if code templates in there, knots and lines, quick reference guides, interview questions, answers, and guidance. So go in there, check it out. You want to develop yourself. If you're looking to develop a firefighter on your station, head into the App Store or click the notes in the podcast links below. Dawn, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Well, I'm very well, thanks, Pete. It's nice to be here.
It's lovely to have you. When did we first meet? I think it was about 2 years ago at WFS. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, I think we exchanged a few tweets before that in Twitter sphere. But yes, we actually met at the Fire Service College. Yeah.
Whenever I go to some of those events, especially WFS, I am continually amazed and inspired by them. But more than anything than that, I think they're the most wonderful example of some of the eclectic people that we attract to the emergency services these days. And for people that are unfamiliar with yourself, could you just give us a whistle-stop tour of who you are first and foremost, for people that are unfamiliar, and kind of your journey into the emergency services? Because I think yours is a really fascinating one.
Okay, so I was born and brought up in South Wales. I come from a farming community in quite a rural part of, well, all Wales is rural, really, isn't it? And so from the get-go, really, I care about nature and I care about community, and sort of those sit as sort of some fairly core principles. Grew up there, educated there, then decided that I would go off to college rather than do my A-levels. I kind of just had enough of school and school uniform and wanted to be my own person. So went off to technical college, did hotel catering and institutional management, which started sort of the input into leadership. And although, I am a competent cook, it was more the leadership side that I was interested in.
Why were you more interested in the leadership side of it?
Well, because I think it's quite a dynamic environment. It's hot, there's sharp things, there's lots of people, it's about customer service. And
I think if you've never worked in a bar or a restaurant, it is a really great character building environment, because it's so fast paced,
it's hard
pressure,
work.
everything is coming at you. People are emotional and passionate, especially the cooks and the waiters and the waiters and the customers. It is a very high paced environment, isn't it?
High pace and hard work, but I wasn't frightened of that. I grew up on a farm. So did 2 years in Pembrokeshire, Technical College, then went on and did a higher national diploma in Colchester, based in Clacton-on-Sea, very exotic.
Okay.
So right across the country. I then, after I graduated, I went to work for John Lewis's department stores on their degree program. They only take, in that particular program, they only took usually 2 or 3 a year. The year I went in, it was just me. So it's like,
wow.
okay, voyage was the unknown, but fine. And
So for people that are
I
unfamiliar, sorry, is that sort of like a graduate program for leadership development, or is it
yeah,
more of an apprenticeship style
no,
development aspect?
graduate. Yeah, so you have to have a degree to enter onto it, and the outcome is supposedly that you end up, in a managerial position within 2 years, or there or thereabouts.
We used to do a big one of them for Mars Pet Care. I used to work
Okay.
for Mars, and we had a massive graduate program. We used to have like 20 a year, and they'd
Yeah.
come in similar to our direct entry thing that we're doing now ish. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, similar and different, because graduate programs are very much about attracting people at a certain stage in their development where they've got qualifications in academic learning, but may not have been out in business and delivered. Some of them have, because obviously some of them are mature students, but they have a slightly different emphasis. But effectively, it's about attracting the best people to whichever organisation you're in, really, and having some freshness and some difference. So, yeah, worked with them, started and did about 14 or 15 stores, got promoted in 18 months and started working at Peter Jones. Do you know it, on Sloane Square?
I've heard of that one. Yeah, I've never been to the site myself.
Yeah, fantastic location.
It's one of their flagship stores, isn't it?
One of flagship stores, yeah, lots of history, and it's got a royal warrant, so and dead close to Chelsea, so quite posh. And worked with them for quite a while, and that was a fantastic experience. I then moved to Milton Keynes, and then on to Peterborough. Anyway, I did the circuit, eventually heading up as a department head, and then stayed with John Lewis for 14 years, I think, in total.
Wow.
And finished my career running a retail part of John Lewis Milton Keynes, and left in 2002. I went to work for Northamptonshire County Council. No longer exists, because obviously it's been split into 2 unitaries. But I went to work there on basically the development of a new team, a performance and planning team.
Okay.
That was an interesting experience. Moving from fast-paced retail into the democratic machines.
I was about to say, what was that like? Because it was similar
Yeah.
for me when I left Mars, a big profit-driven corporate organization where it's fast-moving consumer goods, factory-based stuff, and we were about efficiency, targets, waste reduction, optimization, Kaizen, Six Sigma, and then into the public sector where it can, but not always, but can be very difficult to quantify people's value sometimes, with the greatest respect.
Yeah, so I've done a sort of experience, but I sort of thought, well, I've got a skill set. I was a qualified project manager. Had done a lot of work on, delivering large scale rejuvenation and change projects. So I thought, well, let's give it a go, see how it rolls. But yeah, the pace and the process, and actually, the lack of quality IT systems just was a bit of a shock, given the experience that I'd had in the private sector rather. So, but adaptively, I could see that it was a changing point, and
there's a big from and to there if
yeah.
you want to grab it by the horns, isn't there? Which is exciting.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly that. And making a difference is frankly one of my core motivators. So I thought, right, okay, let's give this a go. Ended up running the PMO, the program management team, and that was across the whole council. So fascinating, taking a look into social care, children's services, transport, trading standards, across the whole sort of plethora of services that a county council delivers. Learnt lots about democratic processes and politics with a big P. I was then asked to help out fire and rescue for a bit because they were about to start. Do you remember back in the day when CPA was introduced, Corporate Performance Assessment, by the Audit Commission, and that was about to start, and FAR wanted a little bit of additional support.
They needed it. That's my words, not yours. Because they really struggled to. There was an aspect of we shouldn't have to prove the value that we add, but people forget very much so, and you'll know this far better than me. I'm just being polite here, but it's like you're running a multi-million-pound organization, you just don't realize you are. And that is a very different skill set, with the greatest of respect, than a lot of us, myself included, joined the emergency services with. So I think acknowledging and taking guidance and help from people from far more business, academic and business background has been a tremendous game changer for us, and has made us tremendously more efficient with our pennies and allowed us to do a lot more things than historically we were able to.
So, I certainly didn't need to teach anybody in Northamptonshire Fire and Rescue Services about passion.
No,
they got that in spades. But what they probably hadn't done was develop some of their back office systems, processes to help, and also probably I would say some skills development in managing projects was really needed back then. But it was the fire service that asked for it, so great. They were part of the county council, and the county council sought to oblige, and I went over there for 6 months. That was nearly 20 years ago.
Can I double click you there, because you mentioned it twice, and it's a really important thing that I don't want to skim over, because a lot of people will skim over it in the emergency services because we don't actually understand it. Whereas you said they're a qualified project manager. Now, there are a lot of people in the emergency services, a lot of the fire service, get given projects as an opportunity to develop, but we're never really, in my personal opinion, given any formal training about what good project management looks like. And I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but is it possible at all to give me an elevator workshop of tips and tricks of what you think people commonly misunderstand or misinterpret, or how good projects should be ran? Is that possible?
Yes, you just have to watch it. Don't go on for too long. So
okay. No, please do. I think it's very valuable.
So I guess the first thing I'd say is I was a qualified project manager, but I'd been a program management office manager. So I'd got programs and portfolios under my belt as well. And being, coordinating a team of project managers and understanding the delivery of change on an organizational level is sort of something that you don't just get from just a project manager. But one of the antithesis in the public sector is that everybody thinks that project manager is about Prince 2 as a process, as a sort of a schema. Well, there are thousands of different project management methodologies that you can use out there, some more recommended by APM than others. But it is about process and it is about clarity, but actually project management is about change management. Okay. It's about really clearly explaining the rationale for something, tracking it, making sure it's delivered, making sure that you spot things that might go peak-tong, in advance, and finding solutions to them in a considered way, engaging everybody that's got, skin in the game, all of the stakeholders, which is the public sector term. But, from my perspective, having historically delivered quite large-scale programs in the private sector, and then moving into public sector and doing a bit of voluntary sector on the side, and I'll mention that in a minute. But I got to know that it is more about engagement and interface with people than it is about the forms that you fill in. But obviously they're an important part of it. For me, the most critical part of any project is the definition document.
Okay.
Call it what you will, call it a PID or a scope. But unless you get that right, the rest will go wrong.
We used to do this with all of our Six Sigma and Kaizen stuff. It was always a problem well identified as a problem half solved. And you used to do your 5 why processes and really try and really articulate. And I see it with podcasting. It's like how to ask better questions. If you ask a better question, you'll get a better answer. But often we make things very vague, don't we?
Yeah, and I think I saw good projects, or what should have been a good project with a really strong principle, fail because it was poorly defined. So I ended up needing to, apart from redefining the county council's project methodology and simplifying some bits and knocking out bits they really didn't need. I spent a lot of time going around the different services and speaking. I had 96 projects in the programme, and speaking to all of the project managers about their initiation documents. And I ended up with a team, I can't remember how many were in the team. I think it was 8 project managers who then went into sort of dedicated directorates to then sort of help support them, but also, make sure that all the documents were brought together so I could try and do, the summary document for the board of on the county council and the directors of services, which was quite challenging. I also found, this is the other thing, you have to be, as an organisation, mature enough and ready enough to take on a full PMO, to take on a project management office, because they are going to tell you things that you do not want to hear. And that was quite challenging. Certainly there were times when the board just wanted to concentrate on the reds.
Yeah. Would some of the HMI reviews be a good analogy for this, or is that am I stretching a bit for that there?
Yeah, well, I think there are parallels. It's different, obviously, because in HMI terms, you've got somebody externally coming in. In a PMO, you're actually looking at things yourself for delivery, and actually, if you can't even sort of completely swallow the looking at it yourself, you're going to struggle when the external people come in.
Yeah.
Kind of that, you can see how that would work. Hey, but it was a hugely ambitious program, and actually, I had to tell them that. I had to tell them they'd overcooked the pudding and that they'd got project managers with the best will and intention in the world hadn't got either the capacity or the capability to deliver it, which was quite a difficult
message to deliver.
Yeah, and so early on, although as the PMO I was there to sort of coordinate all the projects, I said to them, the first thing I've got to do is train. I've got to train them all. Got to spend a lot of time, and I apologise, I'm going to take them out of your business, but we have got to get them to understand, the importance and the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it, and help them to be better at it. So, that took a bit of time, and I guess, they were a bit frustrated with the time that took, but it did mean that we started to land things. We started to do delivery.
People don't realize that always, though. Cultural change does take, on average, something like 5 to 7 years. It's not a quick process, because we're so focused on quarters and years and financial constraints that demand change within a certain time frame, which often for long-lasting cultural change isn't realistic, really.
Yeah, and if things aren't right now, you're not going to put them right, tomorrow. It's just unrealistic. But as they became more adept and more understanding of where things were at, it moved on. But it's really tough for any, I guess, public sector organisation, I would say, to have made that journey, and let's not forget that was 20 years ago. And of course, things moved on, and in terms of the final point of your question, which is project management in a potted history, I would say if you can work with an experienced project manager before you try and manage a project yourself, it would be really helpful. So, make sure if you do want to qualify and you do want to join APM, the Association of Project Managers, ask for a mentor, get some, ringside experience before you put on your gloves.
Would you agree that there, and I'll promise I'll make this the last part of this. Would you agree there is value in getting mentors who even don't work within the sector that you work in? Because, historically in some leadership and management development things, people have been asked to simulate projects outside of their sector, and some struggled to see the value in it. I think they were so ingrained within their own bias of it had to be based on the fire and rescue service or the police or whatever. And when you ask them to run a project for a factory, they would push against it because they didn't see it was valuable for them.
Is it possible to answer 110%? Look, unless you broaden your own horizons and learn from difference, you will be restricted by the exposure, knowledge, expertise in your own field. So,
Silo
I think
thinking.
It just makes you stronger, makes you think differently, makes you aware of things that you wouldn't ordinarily be aware of. And, later on, we might just chat about a couple of examples of that. But also, I think, it makes you also aware that even if you think, you're an expert in a field, fire and rescue, retail, whatever else, you come to realise actually you've still got lots to learn. And that's quite an important thing to remember. Leadership is a continual learning process.
Beautiful. Thank you for humouring me with that. I want to take us now to your transition over. Obviously, you moved into public sector, and unlike most others, although unsurprisingly given your background, you jumped straight into an MBA, your dissertation on the new models for emergency services. That was around 2013. Where's my time frame in relation to when you came into the emergency services side?
Yeah, so I started working as part of the Public Protection Directorate, which included fire and the coroner, trading standards, and the County Council's community safety team in 2004. And quite quickly, I guess, I was asked to focus in on fire because of the whole CPA thing. And spotted, some stuff that needed to
some low-hanging fruit
to develop. Yeah, that's right. And actually, at that time, and things have changed a bit, but there weren't too many senior women in fire then. I think Susan Johnson and Millington joined about the same time as I did. There were some great people already in the sector, Cheryl Rolfe, Sue, Danny, who were women and working hard to deliver change. But
again, very different backgrounds from yourself, though. A very different
backgrounds.
Tools set.
Yeah, that's right. And a blend of difference, like anything. I'll keep on going back to that. Helps. So in Northants, I started working with fire in 2004, and then an opportunity came up. Well, it was sort of a mixed opportunity because the county council was strapped for money, and actually that meant the fire service was strapped for money back in those days, and it was quite challenging. And so there was kind of a difficult conversation that sort of went, we value what you can bring, but to have a senior manager directly in fire that doesn't do the whole job is not really sustainable, affordable. So
I was going to say, with the greatest of respect, if it's not for people like you with a tremendous passion and a why to make a difference, we often in emergency services can't afford the caliber of person with your kind of CV to come in and make the changes that we really need as well.
Well, I think that was their dilemma. I actually took a pay drop initially to move over because I was an assistant director in the county, but that wasn't what was driving me really. It was about making a difference, delivering change. So I sort of said, yeah, okay, I'll give it a go. And little did I know. But anyway, I had I had a fantastic experience. Look, let's be realistic. There are bumps in the road. There are people that were resistant to it. I had a ex-colleague who used to work in Leicester told me to get a steel tray and stick it down the back of my tunic because I'd need it. And stuff happened, but it's just about people's acceptance of change. It wasn't personal, really. So I get all that, and I've been doing project management and change management enough to understand that.
But do you ever, sorry to interrupt, do you ever kind of concern if someone without your level of resiliency comes across similar barriers, whilst they do have a tremendous skill set to add, they might not have pushed through like you did?
Yeah, and I've seen that happen, and personal resilience is actually quite an important part of being able to stay sane, actually, when you're going significant change in your life. But it's not just about work, is it? When you have changes at home, when you move house, when you get married, when you get divorced, if you have children, or if you've got somebody that you love dearly who's got a
you
life,
either embrace change or it's thrust upon you by life.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. I kind of have been a person who sort of sorted out, I guess, historically. But with some core principles, I'm not a change junkie. It was about whether or not it was going to make a difference. I decided when I was going on this journey, and there's quite a few people looking at it, quite a few services looking at it at the time, back in 2004, 2005, 2006. We'd just had the change to the Fire Services Act, which deregulated the service, which meant you could, if you wanted to, promote people that hadn't started as firefighters. So there were quite a lot of people dabbling in it, and joined a group at Fire Service College to explore it. But everybody was doing it differently, and some people were sort of doing it partially, and I don't know.
That doesn't sound like us.
It was all a bit random, let's face it. And people didn't know what to do with us, really. But Northampton did invest some time and energy into it. And I think one of the best things they did was a guy called Sean, who worked in the training department and was, look, this is meant with lots of love. He was quite a pedant, he was quite determined that people would be professional and do it properly. So he wanted things done according to the old exam papers and all that sort of thing, which, at times didn't feel appropriate, but actually it was really valuable. Because I went back to basics, and although I was never going to train to be a firefighter, I went on to an initial recruits course with an RDS cohort.
I know you did. I love that about you. That's such a weird, unnecessary thing to do, but buys you so much authenticity.
Well, I think the thing was, to be honest, I'd been in catering donkeys years ago, and I remember once working in a kitchen. I won't name the organisation, but it wasn't John Lewis's. And the chef said I said to the chef, I don't think we should do it like that. We should do it like this. I was being paid to be a supervisor. And he said, if you think you can, and there was a variety of languages used, and he put his apron down and he walked out the kitchen.
Ouch.
And it was a bit ouchy, but I thought, right, okay, put your big girl pants on, and went and got changed, put the apron on, and I ran the kitchen for that afternoon and evening. And it kind of, everybody was a bit sort of, oh my God, but it got done. And obviously the jungle drums happened because he came back in the next morning and went, fair enough, let's have a chat about, how you want things done differently, and I'll tell you what's important to me. It
buys you authenticity, which is great, but it's relative to people's emotional intelligence, because now at your position, and I'm sorry to skip forward, but like, chief fire officers can't say that they need to know every aspect of their services. That's why we employ specialists in human resources, in accounting, in acquisition, in all of the different aspects. We don't have to be able to know the other thing. We have to trust the experts in place. But with the fire and rescue service, and of course I would say this, is a very unique beast where people like to know that you do know how to do the thing, even though it will never actually be a relevant part of your job. It's a weird thing that we demand, isn't it?
And actually, I trust my professional firefighters. they are competent professional firefighters.
Mm.
They know how to do what they do, and what they need me to do is make sure they've got in place what they need to facilitate them to do it.
Yeah.
And so, once everybody gets that and understands it, and I don't go on the incident ground and interfere. Obviously, I've been an incident commander now for quite a lot of years, and experienced some interesting jobs. But that's by the by, because I have always listened to technical experts, subject matter experts on the incident ground, and don't think there's absolutely nothing here that says I think I know best, because they've done it for longer and they've done it on a daily basis. So I think it's about utilising your skills and knowledge for the best together.
I think that's even relevant on a local basis. I always say to people, I'm a watch commander, but there's loads and loads and loads of firefighters far better than me. I think I'm a better watch commander than I was a firefighter. It's a different skill set.
It is. It is. And I do a bit of work with water safety and drowning prevention. Well, we have got really competent swiftwater rescue technicians who know this stuff inside out and upside down. And I want to hear what they've got to say, because although I understand the networking and the partnership and how to advocate and how to get political engagement and how to bid for money, they understand the technicalities of water rescue. So, it's about deploying the right people together to get the best outcome.
100%.
And it's the same on the Instagram. So where were we? What were we chatting about before?
Back to basics. Sorry, I dragged you down a rabbit hole yet again.
That's okay. So went into Northamptonshire, decided to go on my direct entry journey, did some basics, did some learning, did lots and lots and lots of adaptation. And bizarrely enough, I was, at that time, apart from Debs, who ran the control room in Northants, I was the only female officer in Northamptonshire. And that was sometimes interesting and sometimes a bit of a lonely place, if I'm honest.
Could you give any tips for people that are about to enter the direct entry? Because obviously we've relaunched it in the last 12 months, haven't we? So it'll be very new to a lot of services who have never done it before. Yeah. And you kind of experienced the first hybrid versions of it.
Yeah, so the reason that I have supported the NFCC programme for direct entry is that I would like to see it done properly, robustly and consistently. Because you mentioned earlier, did I ever see anybody that didn't have enough resilience? Well, I also saw people that didn't go through the right journey, if you see what I mean, and weren't adequately supported and then came a cropper.
You were kind of dragged along a half-paved road that wasn't quite ready yet and maybe pulled through a few bushes backwards because the process wasn't where you wanted it to be.
Really hard. I mean, I think to get signed off as competent, I was assessed by 5 different agencies. Now, you point another person out that had been through the traditional route that had to go through that ringer. But, fine. I thought, okay, they need assurance. I'll just do it. And I've still got my development write-off report of my development program and my assessment because I'm really proud of it. And Hampshire Fire and Rescue Service, a guy called Ty Whitlock, who was known in the sector then as one of the leading L&D managers, he wrote a note on there saying lots of people could learn from the presentation of your development folder. And I thought, well, okay, that's great then. And I guess, then I spent my years then progressing through. I supported Warwickshire for a bit. I went over there on secondment post Atherstone on Stour to help that service for a bit, and then I was on secondment into the Home Office for a bit, and then I moved down to Sussex in 2016 as DEP. But throughout that journey, I kind of saw the need for the sector, but also wasn't really in a position. We weren't ready, to be honest, to sort out the leadership pathways piece. And then when NSCC a couple of years ago said, we're going to have a leadership management program, we want to look at all the different pathways, and that's for external people as well. The supervisory development leadership program, I don't know if you've looked at that.
Time was really running out for us to sort it out ourselves, especially now we've seen all the cultural stuff over the last couple of years. They're like, we've been saying this to you for a decade. You really need to sort this out, or we're going to sort it out for you in the nicest possible way.
Yeah, and we owed it to our people, to be honest, because
100%.
We were taking jolly good firefighters, trying to turn them into supervisory officers and station managers and beyond, and some of them weren't ready or weren't cut out for it, one or the other. And some of them flew great, some of them landed and have done immensely through their careers, but
that was luck more than planning, I think, sometimes.
And to be honest, for some of them, just a bit of bloody mindedness. They were going to succeed no matter what. Work with their asses. So I just thought, no, I'm up for that. I'll help with it. And then when I was asked, would I, get involved in developing a direct entry program, I said, yes, of course I will, but I'm not doing it on my own, because there are still, whilst I think I've worked hard to have that credibility and get on and do my job properly, there is still lots of services and lots of parts of our sector that would be incredibly suspicious, concerned, principally against that. So I said, well, I'll work with another, officer that wants to do it, but can I work with somebody from a traditional background so we can balance each other on differences in thought again. So started working on it with Rod Hamilton of Shropshire. When he retired, Rob Barber in Staffordshire has taken over that mantle, and I absolutely think, from what I've seen through the development of the project, which, as you say, is now live and we're recruiting, there's definitely been yin and yang in there, and that has helped to develop a really robust program. And I think we've got a small number of early adopter services, but when applications closed and we exceeded 600 applications, and 21% of those applications were from women, and from a huge variety of organisations and sectors, as well as internally. Actually, that we had internal candidates as well, and if they met the criteria, they got through.
I know there was a lot of internal candidates from people at the UK Fire and Rescue Service that I've spoken to, a lot. Yeah,
but thought, well, this might be an opportunity for me. And they liked the look of the programme, and because we advertised, obviously, what we were going to put in the development pathway, and it's robust.
There's also so many people join at different stages of their life now. They'll join as a firefighter, but already with a tremendous skill set from a previous career. But sometimes the time it will take them to get through to a position of change and leadership might take a few years, 5 years, and they could have had all of that innovation and skill set bashed out of them. That muscle might have atrophied completely by the time they get there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And and also, I've got on-call staff that run their own businesses. So
multi-million-pound businesses, some of them. I know ones that have haulage and clothing companies, incredible managers.
That's right. So they got business acumen, they've got it. So we basically said, no, it's not closed to internal applicants, but they need to be able to meet the criteria and stand up against,
scrutiny.
Obviously scrutiny, and when,
because we don't want nepotism again, do we? Don't want the old boys club. No,
we don't, but neither do we want to exclude talent. So you go for an open process, transparent, and actually, when the shortlisting was done, nobody knew their name or where they worked. They were judging them on the, on the actual facts and data in front of them. And so, 21% females is also a fantastic result, I think, in terms of recruitment. So we're now at that sifting out stage. The services are all, getting down to a shortlist. And we shortly have a open day up at Fire Service College, where all of the shortlisted delegates can come and see what it is.
When is that?
End of the month.
What?
I'll send you the date separately if you
I
like.
would love to, speak to you again after this privately. I think it'd be a great thing to capture their journeys a little bit as they move through it, if people are willing and able. But sorry, I digressed.
Yeah, so we've got an open day, and the shortlisted candidates will come and get a bit of exposure, see, uh, a bit more grit of what's going to be involved. And of course, we're not training them to be competent firefighters in terms of the NOS. What we actually are doing is making sure that they will have adequate exposure
Yes.
to understand what our firefighters do and the risk factors and health and safety and what it feels like to be, in a really hot container, and what it feels like to IBA, and all of those things. So not necessarily do the job, but have an appreciation.
Yeah, the
for it.
appreciation of the people they're going to be working with, serving, providing for, and
Yeah,
what those
respecting
people are
their
asked to do.
professionalism,
Yes.
actually. So yeah, that'll be fascinating. I'm just really looking forward to meeting the people and finding out what they're like. But we're asking a lot of the services and also the individuals, and nobody's got rose tinted glasses in here. Some of them are going to have tough journeys, but what I do hope is that in the services that are directly engaged in this, people go in those services going with an open mind. And one of the best things about Northamptonshire, when I was going through my journey, although it was tough and occasionally the pathway wasn't very clear, to be honest, I came across some individuals who were so professional that even though they might have been against the principle, they wanted it done properly and would give of their own time, would send me a YouTube video of fire behaviour and say, do you want to talk through this, Dawn? We can organise a little session, a professional discussion, and we could talk through this. And on the incident ground, as I developed, shadowed, then took sector, and then took overall incident command, the mentors that I had would spend time with me. They would write up their contemporaneous notes and give me notes for file. And, I think there were 3 or 4 individuals who will, forever remain, I have total respect for, who were mistrustful in the start, but by the very end, one of them said to me, you deserve this, you have worked so hard. And actually, I've as much confidence in you as some of the other people that are incident commanders in our service. And actually I thought, well, that's great for me, but that's a measure of that person, because they changed their opinion and they were also prepared to input. So I have respect for those people. And I also have respect for those that haven't had exposure and still have questions that they need answered. So we'll see, but it's going to be interesting for people.
So take me now to it was 2016 when you became Deputy Chief Fire Officer, wasn't it? When did you actually join East Sussex?
So I was Deputy Chief Officer in Northants, actually. When did I end up as Dep? Crikey, I have to look back at my dates. It might have been 2009. I'd have to look at. I'd have to go to my own LinkedIn profile to remember.
That's okay.
Because things have moved. So anyway, I was Dep there. Did a secondment into Warwickshire, then went into the Home Office for a bit and learned loads about fire protection and business safety, which was fabulous. Because I got involved with running the CFREG team, the protection team that look after all the government buildings and prisons and Her Majesty's.
A lot of people can do secondments into HMI and stuff, can't they? I think it's a really exciting development opportunity. That's something I want to apply for a little bit.
It definitely, if you know more about the sector and how it works, but working firstly in DCLG and then the Home Office, and working with civil servants, and we can, particularly in the context of the culture that's happened over the last years, we can all have opinions about civil servants, but there are some really good people in there with fantastic skills that really do want to help frontline change. And so I really enjoyed understanding better how the wheels of turn in democracy.
Was going to say, it helps you better understand the why behind things, doesn't it? Because you get to understand how the cogs work. Sometimes you get an answer
You do.
and you just go, oh, that's because that person's doesn't care, or they're mean, or they're evil, or whatever, or they're all about themselves. But it's because you don't understand the why behind it. And sometimes someone's maybe not taking the time to explain the why. But if you understand how the cog works, then you can have a better understanding for what levers to pull as well.
Yeah, and you can read the books and you can read the papers, but being in it, immersed in it, I learned a lot about Big P and Little P. So that was a valuable experience. And then, yes, as you quite rightly say, I came down, finished my secondment with HMI. Well, I hadn't finished my secondment. My secondment was still, I did 18 months and it was 2 years. But the opportunity came up in East Sussex and it really interested me. We were looking to move to the south of the country anyway, for a variety of other reasons, but also because Des Pritchard had worked in East Sussex and I'd had a bit of exposure to Des through the work, because I'd been on ATFO Council. I believe in trade union representation. I did it. I was a student rep. I became a rep in FAR in 2006, and I've done it pretty much continuously. I'm Southeast chair for the FLA down here now.
Wow.
So I thought, wow, great. Well, I know Des, and he's been, NFCC and CFO, and so that would be a really interesting brigade to work in. And the other interesting reason, I guess, was Marley Farm had happened.
Yes.
And having worked in Warwickshire after Atherstone, I knew what that would feel like. An organisation shocked to its core, in mourning and recovering for a period of time, going through all the processes and
the questioning of yourself and the what could have been done differently,
absolutely.
and did we give that person every opportunity, and are we looking after our people? Internal and external scrutiny and debriefs and publications is a very, obviously Danny knows a tremendous amount about it. We've had a few conversations about it, but it's never any more or less. I always say it's just different for people. The gravity of it is all relative to the size of the service and things like that.
It is, and East Sussex is quite a small little service, really.
Sometimes makes it harder though, because everybody knows everybody.
Everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody, and the context of Marley Farm. If you don't know, people know a lot about the incident and can read the report and look at the facts, but it was as a result of a fireworks holding area. I won't go into
We've covered
details,
it on the podcast. Yeah, there's a debrief that people can listen to.
And actually understanding what that meant culturally down here, because if you understand bonfire societies and how important they are, so you'd actually got people that worked in the fire service that were also members of bonfire societies, and they're a charitable organisation, and they do lots of good work, but it's an enigma to those people that haven't read about bonfire societies, and they've got a lot of history and a lot of tradition. But there was a real quandary here, because people that were passionate about them were also firefighters and police officers and ambulance workers and all that sort of stuff. And here, this tragic incident that took lives was just, it shook East Sussex, actually, not just the fire service. It shook East Sussex. So that I knew that would be an immense challenge, but one that I'd had a degree of exposure to with Atherstone. So for
you've been a bit of a wartime general already, a little bit in that analogy, and
the exposure. I don't think I was general then, because I wasn't in charge of it,
the analogy,
but in the analogy, I'd certainly been on the battlefield, put it like that. And all of those things were true when I came down here, and of course then we had Shoreham disaster, which the service was involved in as well. So it was like, it was like there's a shockwave and then there's another shockwave sort of thing that impacted on people. So it was really interesting when I was interviewed for this post. I said, I can't find your wellbeing strategy. I'd looked on the internet. I'd asked if there was something on the intranet that I couldn't see. But
that's an awkward question in an interview.
Yeah, well, I wanted to see it because
fair play to you. No, some people just say, "Oh, thanks, I really appreciate being here. I'll take anything you give me." Sometimes.
Yeah, and I think perhaps it was just a wee bit soon because they were still dealing with it. They were still in the midst of it.
Yeah.
And while certainly things have been put in place with counselling and trauma support and things like that, hadn't quite got to the stage of developing that as a more of a strategy for every day, apart from just those traumatic incidents. And here's my belief: if you can't get well-being for your firefighters right on a day-to-day basis, you're certainly not going to get it right when something goes really badly wrong.
I've been trying to push around the services and region that I work in that we try and do some sort of mental health pulse check when people join the service, because we do a fitness check when they join.
Yeah.
And we do a fitness test every couple of years. So then if you do have a problem with your fitness, you know who to ask because you talk to that person because you see them every year or every 2 years. But when you have a challenge with your own wellness or your own mental health, it's a bigger wall to climb over because you never scale it. You're never introduced to it. There's no regular door or window that you enter through on an annual basis to check. So then if you do have to reach out for support, it's has a stigma to it. I think if we did it every year, and when we know full well, and you'll know far better than me, so I'm sure I'll ruin all these statistics, but I think mental health is the number one cost of sickness now. I think it's just overtaken manual handling or musculoskeletal injuries. I'm sure I'm getting those statistics wrong, but
so
it is a colossal cost, long-term stress.
It varies around the country, but there'll also be huge underreporting because I think in some places there is still a stigma. We have worked really hard in East Sussex to break that stigma down. And in 2016, East Sussex were the service that they were number one on what's known as the Cleveland Index. And that's because it's put together by Cleveland Fire and Rescue Service for stress absence related to mental health. So
on the back end, we know it's a massive cost, but we lean away from the small cost of prevention early on.
Yeah, so that I think it is changing, and certainly since the Firefighters charity have started, psychiatric support and started tackling mental health as well as physical well-being. That's really important. So yeah, we started 2 groups, Healthy Body and Healthy Mind, and just invited people to get involved and have discussions about what they'd like to do, and developed a wellbeing strategy and all those things. But when I came down here, I knew that would be a big thing. So we've spent a lot of time and energy on it. And obviously this, that's paying dividends because although we've still got people on long-term sick and we've still got people that are suffering because we are a microcosm of humanity, what my staff have said back during surveys is that they believe that the service cares about their well-being and they know that there are things in place for them. And of course, there are people that will have bumpy rides, and certainly what, we're doing now is investigating the fact that the NHS delays mean that people that are actually it's a clinical condition they've got, but it affects their mental health because they cannot get treatment and they cannot get up,
I think it's a 6-month waiting list, isn't it? They say you can get free counselling, I think they term it as, through the NHS, but it is something like a 6-month waiting list, which is
even something like a hernia, right? And a hernia is a fairly common, I guess, condition in the fire service, lifting, weights and all that sort of stuff. You've had a couple, right? Yeah. Okay, so what it's like.
It's not life-threatening, potentially, but it is very life-altering. Yes, definitely.
And you might not be on the run and able to do your full job. And that for some people, that's their reason for being. The job
Yeah.
and being a firefighter is core, and the longer they have to wait to get that treated and get back to work, it affects their mental health as well,
Yeah.
because they're not being the person they want to be and doing the job they love. So
I absolutely went
we
sliding down the side of that mountain in
yeah,
September last year when I snapped my patella tendon in my knee. And I was in a wheelchair for a little bit, and I was learning to walk again over Christmas. And it was a very
yeah,
long question of whether or not I could
you'd be able
do the
to
job
come back.
again. But also I was scared. I was scared for the first time since I was a child. I was scared I would fall down the stairs. I was scared somebody would bump into me and I would hurt myself. And I don't remember ever being scared like that.
No, I think that's, well, your experience speaks to what I've witnessed, and particularly for men. um I think their ability to be physically active, strong, get
Mm.
out and play with the kids, do their job, is really do their sport.
Mm.
Some
It's part of my
guys,
identity. It's
that's
a
exactly,
thing that I hold. I'm a doer. I'm active. People can rely on me. I can do things for people. It's part of my identity. It's how I value myself or
that's
hold
right.
my value to others. Really, I
And if
suppose.
you can't, then that impacts on you. So
100%.
being really aware of that, and how that can impact, I think, is really important. So yeah, we've invested hugely, and actually, I don't know, the other thing that sort of is real for me. I lost a good friend, uh, uh, a chap I was in college with, who took his own life in a difficult set of circumstances, and how fragile is life. So,
Mm.
I have to say, when I introduced Calm as an organisation to East Sussex, I had a bit of a reaction, because some of the firefighters said, "You can't put those magazines on our stations; they've got swear words in." And
I'll behave yourself.
I'm like, "Well, firefighters can swear like troopers. Look, this is about a magazine that writes for men's mental health,
I know.
for men, written by
That's
men."
just
So,
people virtue signaling, just being
well,
annoying little sausages because
so I just
they
know, don't
actually
read it
see
then.
value
Don't
in the
read it.
thing, but they're
Don't
missing
read
it.
it. You
Yeah.
have to read it. I'm not forcing it down. I've made a personal donation to Calm and joined us as an organisation. And if it's there and it's interesting, then now, a couple of years later, if the magazines aren't there, somebody will say, "Are we getting one of those?"
There
Even though
you
they're online.
go.
But it's one of those things, isn't it? That's
I
just
think
important.
this aspect of calm and mental wellness might be a lovely jump off point for a transition into something that you are a tremendous advocate for. And I heard you recently on a Lunch and Learn podcast around neurodiversity and your own history and background and within your family as well. And again, you seem uniquely positioned to be a very articulate and powerful advocate for this.
So there's some great work going on in the sector, but there's also some services that haven't really tackled this.
Mm.
So neurodiverse, as you can Google it anyway, but it's a collective umbrella term for a variety of conditions, thinking patterns that are what non-neurotypical.
Mm.
It's about difference in thinking, difference in processing. And some of the associated conditions are dyslexia, dyspraxia, dyscalculia, Tourette's. There's a list of things that sort of fall under the umbrella. And interestingly, of course, with improved diagnosis and more, I guess, publication and communication about this, diagnosis is getting better, and I think about a quarter of the population in the recent studies are known to be on the spectrum.
100%.
So
I mean, do you
for
think
where
though
it's
the
happening,
diagnosis themselves are useful, or are people worried about being labeled? Because I myself was diagnosed ADHD around 3 years ago, but I've never declared it to my service because I'm a recovering addict, and I think I've just self managed and adapted the environments that I am in, how I work, who I work with, I think it has limited me at times in my career, but I wouldn't inherently say that it means that I struggle any more or less than anybody else. And I don't say that to dumb it down, because I think there's people that struggle tremendously, but I don't know. I've never thought, because when I have mentioned it to people before and they've gone, oh, you need to tell somebody, you need to say this, you need to say that. I almost feel like, well, because some people have then gone to me and gone, oh, well, you'll struggle with this then, Pete. Or, because now I work in the training department and people have said, I think you're going to struggle working with that student because of this. And I feel like people use it as a bit of a weapon against me sometimes. So I prefer, whilst I talk about it on the podcast, which is perhaps ironic, I don't tend to mention it to my colleagues, because I try and say that it doesn't affect me.
So I think it's the choice of whether to declare or not is as unique as the conditions that feature in the spectrum. And it will also depend on whether your organisation is demonstrating its appreciation of difference, and whether or not the organisation that you work in has kind of done something with it, I guess. So, but what I would say, in my experience, and certainly down here in East Sussex, we have a neurodiversity network, and it of course it's there for staff that are either diagnosed or not diagnosed, or just have interest, but actually also has been hugely valuable for parents of children who are SEND, who've got special educational needs, or have been diagnosed, with autism or condition, just as a support network, quite frankly. And I think if that helps their mental health, then I'm all for, giving them some time from work to attend. So I think it depends on a whole series of things. But to say what you'll be good and what you'll be bad at is a bit bizarre, because
people stereotype what those things are.
Yes.
Because they go, like, if you said someone with autism, people would go, oh, people that have poor emotional intelligence and people that are very intense and very aggressive. And you go, no, not at all. That's sometimes if that person is forced into an uncomfortable environment, you may see small attributes of that.
Yeah.
But that's just you're thinking about the clickbait. You're thinking about a video you've seen of some point where someone on that spectrum is very struggling very much with their environment. But could you not say the same of someone without an unrecognized neurodiversity who is just having a very challenging day, who is aggressive and angry and all of these other things? So I don't think it's actually uniquely stereotypical of people with neurodiversity.
And I think, here's the fact, if neurodiverse people have been through an educational system that is designed for neurotypical and have had to try and apply for jobs and go through processes that once again are not adjusted for them, they probably do end up a bit bloody frustrated, frankly. So I think just being aware that frustration might not be about their condition, it might be about the exposures that they've had. But anyway, you're right. So got some lived experience of it in the family. But most of all, I guess, when I came down to East Sussex, obviously you do your, temperature check, your organisational barometer thing. And I dug into everything to find out, all sorts of stuff. And I was interested to note that the three most recent employment tribunals had all been about neurodiversity.
Really?
And that perhaps the learning hadn't moved on, perhaps people hadn't really completely joined up the dots, and so I just thought, we've got to do something about this. This is not right, is it? So we engaged with so we joined the British Disability Forum, BDF, and which isn't a huge amount of money, but the most important thing for me was it provides a line managers helpline. So our line managers, we obviously developed a lot of changes in policy and procedures here, but that also created an independent line for our managers to to talk to if they were working with somebody, and we're trying to work out the best way to deal with an issue, or indeed to support somebody. So we joined them, and then we worked with an organisation called Genius Within.
Yes,
who are
they're great.
They're great.
Yeah,
They're based in here in East Sussex.
I get all of my new recruits on their day one to carry out it's like an audit, isn't it? Which is not, it's not an assessment. It's not a consultation. It doesn't give you a formal diagnosis, but it just helps you try and understand what aspects, especially in that initial acquisition of skills, when that encoding and your ability to engage with whatever's being said or whatever you're doing is very, very crucial, because it's such a small time frame. If we can make those adaptations early, that's the most crucial time to do it. But I don't know how many services. That's not something that's been asked of me. It's just been something I've sneakily put into the scheme of work, to be honest.
It's also other little things like you've just said there. So it's not just for people that are neurodiverse. It's also for people that are going to work with people who are neurodiverse, because it just improves their appreciation. It's simple things like, if as an organisation, some fire services are in this place, you've invested in assistive technology, so things that will help that people
read write software, iPads,
that sort of thing,
videos,
read
imagery,
writes, Dragon, whatever, all that sort of, and pens, the D pen, which is fantastic as a tool, but all that stuff, if you only make it accessible to people once they've got a diagnosis as part of their DDA, then you are missing a trick. So so read and write goals, for example, we just bought the corporate license and said everybody can access it, and then it removes the stigma, plus it also means it actually is quite a useful tool if you're reading a very long boring document, because it'll read it out to you, which is helpful if you're time limited as well, and if you learn by listening as opposed to by reading. And also we've got some people that haven't got strong R&R skills in the sector, so it helps them too. So yeah, I think passionate about it. And then a while ago, you're right, I did the lunch and learn. I did a talk for the LGA, which went down quite well. But
we'll put a link for that in this podcast, because I think it's a really good chat for people to go over and check out the lunch and learn.
Yeah, and I think I tried to signpost some things and probably bust a few myths in that. And then the other thing, which is quite handy for people to have a little look-see at, albeit it's not, it's still in development in a sense, but because terminology changes so quickly, never on top of it. But the NFCC decided to write a series of equality access statements. They're available on the NFCC website. And we wrote one for, I authored the one for neurodiversity, and then had a number of colleagues, somebody from Cant help, and we had it checked by the Autism Society and stuff like that. But it's there to help services rather than them go out and have to do all the background research. It's there as a tool to help.
They're really useful, especially like you said, 15 to 20% of the population are neurodiverse. So we'll put them in the notes below. There's a lunch and learn, the equality of access to services of employment neurodiversity. And there's also a great one I think we spoke about before, which is neurodiversity past and present, the introduction, which is a really, from the Kent Academic Repository, I found a lot of useful detail in that. Given the time of year, and I want to be respectful of your time, I didn't want to miss out any of the aspects that you've done with the tremendous work you've done with the NFCC around drowning prevention, because it's a very pertinent time of year for it, with some of the national and international events that have just been going on. Could you give us a tour of why you first got introduced to that and why you've done so much work with it, I suppose? Yeah,
okay. So this is a core passion for me, and it goes back a long way, some of which anybody who reads the blog that I wrote, that I write regularly, or has looked at some of the documents I've written will know already. So forgive me for being boring. But I had a near drowning experience at the age of 16. It put me off. Thankfully, I've got out, but it put me off swimming for a long, long time. And then back a number of years ago, and I won't give the date or details to be respectful for the family, but I dealt with a significant drowning case and we lost two chaps in Northamptonshire, two guys that went into actually ice-covered water. And it was traumatic for the attenders. It was obviously traumatic for the families, and we went through the whole coroner's inquest and internal inquiry and all that sort of stuff.
I remember that.
And well-known incident. What I came out of that thinking was, apart from dealing with it, because I was deputy chief and had to deal with it, was we've done so much fantastic work with fire prevention and with road safety. What are we doing about water safety? And because we turn up to water incidents, but under our general guises, even though it's not a statutory obligation, but under the Civil Protection Act, we turn up. And
this is a really grey area. Sorry for people. People don't, especially in the public's mind, really don't understand the constraints of first responders in this. Could you just take us, and it's okay if you've not got the terminology in front of you, I know you've probably committed it to memory anyway, the differences between, savable life, body recovery, what the police, the ambulance, because ambulance have got a different definition of what is savable life, given how long people can survive underwater. For us, if they are not please, you're far more knowledgeable than me, please.
So I forgive the pun, but I have been immersed in this for quite a lot of years. And it's changed over the years. And of course, we've got a difference across the UK. So Scotland now have legislation, and Wales now have legislation which includes water rescue as part of their statutory duties as devolved administration. In England, we don't. So it's not even consistent across the UK. And
blindingly frustrating.
I can't tell you how many conversations I've had about trying to get consistency. And the FBU did some good work a few years ago. I mean, obviously it was based on influencing around pay, but certainly getting water rescue recognised as something that we regularly do and increasingly do, I think is something that I totally supported, albeit that it hasn't worked in England. Suffice to say, you then get into differences of different agencies, differences of approach, and it varies again at sea, depending on the waterway that you're talking about. If it's a tidal river, then there's different obligations and different stakeholders involved. And if it's inland or for example, in Scotland, water rescues are reported to the police, and then the fire service are mobilised, even though they've got statutory duty, usually. In England, that's not what happens at all. So it's all very...
It's where those overlapping
muddled
diagrams don't link, though, and there's a hollow spot in the middle where first responders are placed under tremendous pressure from the public and also a tremendous moral desire to do the right thing, but they don't legislatively have the backing of their leaders. I know personally they have the backing of the leaders, but when the chips are down and we go into the investigations, we're not there yet.
Well, I think that the thing is, because it's not a statutory obligation, what most fire services tend to do is have a specialist technical unit, and of course they might not be the first.
They don't have enough of them. They're not placed in the right places all the time.
That's right, and all of our staff get some input, some training, but the competent team for deep water or wading or swim rescues won't be an average firefighter in the majority of cases. And you're right about the weight of expectation, but equally, more people get rescued and saved than do drown because we are part of the response. And when you look at the statistics, about 2/3 more people die from drowning in the UK than die in fires. It's just below 600 people drowned in the UK last year, and you're comparing that to about 240 fire deaths.
And one contributing factor of that will be the hot summers, of which we are very much entering now.
You're absolutely right. So we spike in June, July and August every year in the UK, as you quite rightly say, directly attributable to the change in the weather outdoor temperature. People want to cool off, they want to get out, they want to go and have fun by the water, which is absolutely understandable. And actually, I've done open water swimming since, now that I've got my confidence back. But in lovely, beautiful, scenic lakes, and being at one with nature in the French Pyrenees, and I had a marvellous time. And I understand it's good for people's well-being. So we don't tell people if you have a road accident that you can't drive anymore. We don't tell people if you have a fire in your kitchen, which is the most common place for an accidental dwelling fire to occur, that you can't cook anymore. So, I'm not an advocate for saying you can't go in the water or don't go in open water. That's just stupid. If you look at the beaches this last weekend, there have been thousands of people flooding to go and in the sea.
So they should, for the economy, for their own mental, physical well-being. It's great.
And, it's a leisure activity. So, and, stand-up paddleboards and canoeing and all those things are great activities if you understand the risk and if you take appropriate precautions. So the work I've been doing over a number of years now as the NFCC lead on water safety is to do those two things: educate, inform, help people make safe choices. And a number of years ago, so I've been a member of RLSS for 24 years, the Royal Life Saving Society, and I started with their Save a Baby campaign when I had my youngest son, and went to learn about paediatric CPR, and water if a child fell in water, and got hooked. Became a trustee for them and eventually chair of the board of trustees. And when I finished that, I went to work with. We have a group called the National Water Safety Forum in the UK that write the UK's drowning prevention strategy, and it's a sort of a coalition of about hardcore 50 organisations, but I think we've got over 110 different organisations in membership. And everybody wants to do something about water safety and drowning prevention that's involved with that. And we try and advocate, influence, educate and campaign. And this week is the Royal Life Saving Society, RLSS, Drowning Prevention Week. And because of the work we've done, the plans we've got in place, the strategy we've got in place, the work of the UK has been recognised in other countries, and we contribute to a worldwide alliance. And just fantastic work a couple of years ago by a number of countries working with the UN to deliver on a UN resolution for drowning, which has produced a annual World Drowning Prevention Day, which takes place on the 25th of July every year. And it creates awareness. So the campaign call to action is about do one thing. And if you're already doing one thing, just add another one thing.
Marginal gains.
So, yeah, that's right. Marginal gains. Do something extra. And people will say to me, Dawn, you've been doing this for a lot of years, but drowning hasn't dramatically reduced in the UK. So is what you're doing, working?
Yeah.
And what I would say to that, and we're working hard to evidence it, is if you think, because of the issues of wellbeing have increased post-COVID, people have got out and about and want to enjoy the countryside more.
Yeah.
I can't tell you, back in the day, if you wanted to do stand-up paddleboarding, you had to buy a very expensive, wooden. But now you can go to.
Yeah, I think the numbers participating in things and their ability to access it has increased dramatically. Therefore, if the numbers haven't increased dramatically, they've actually, from a percentage perspective, gone down.
Exactly that. So we've been holding the numbers despite participation increase. There are some fantastic organisations to join if you want to do open water swimming, but running off a high bank or side of a quarry and jumping into cold water is not cold water swimming. That's just taking a risk. So
where would you have us direct people if people wanted to learn a little bit more about that? Where is the best places to go?
So there are loads of places, but I'm going to say that if you've got children that you want to educate about water safety, go to Staywise.
Okay.
Because all of the RNLI, MCA, fire, police have all collaborated to put safety information in there for parents and for teachers about water safety. And there's lots of kiddies activities, colouring in and spot the dangers and all that sort of stuff. If you are sport inclined, then of course there are, if it's diving, it's BSAC, British Scuba Diving Association. If you are interested in paddleboarding or anything like that, then Sport England are a great place to go, or British Canoeing, because they've got lots of information. But if you generally want to just read more about the issue of drowning in the UK, the National Water Safety Forum have got a website called Respect the Water. And they've got their own website, actually, where all the data reports get sunk and all the guidance documents are sunk. So, I would say, of course, I'm the chair, but the National Water Safety Forum tries to be the forum that will develop new guidance and report on data and performance. So it might be a reasonable place to start.
We will put those notes in the podcast. So for adults and children, we've got Stay Wise, we've got BSAC, Sport England, and Respect the Water. We'll drop those.
Fantastic. And a key message that I'm pumping at the minute.
Sorry, please,
is call, tell, throw. If you find somebody in difficulty in water, call 999. Tell them where you are, and if you don't know where you are, use the What Three Words app to discover your location, because it could be quite isolated, or if it's by the side of a riverbank, saying I'm by the side of a riverbank ain't going to help an awful lot. So know where you are, call first, then shout to the person, try to reassure them, tell them that you've spotted them, that you're getting help. And then if you can find something that floats, crikey, even if you've got a lemonade bottle with you that you've been having a picnic, or a water bottle, empty it, seal it, throw it to them, it's got air in it. Football will help if you can't find a throw line or a Perry buoy, the orange and white life rings. But if you can give them something that they can keep their head out of the water, or give them a little bit more confidence, they'll stop panicking. And then tell them float to live, get onto their back, lift their airway out of the water. Everybody can float. Some people are better at it than others, but getting on your back, trying to regulate your breathing and getting your face, and more importantly, your airway out of the water can save a life. So call, tell, throw.
I always used to say to people when I used to instruct on canoeing, stand up sometimes, because you can drown in an astonishingly small amount of water just through panic and disorientation. So sometimes I also try, and I'm not trying to muddy the waters, if you excuse the pun, but encouraging sometimes people to stand up, because people have drowned in very shallow water just through sheer panic.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, that it's easy to get. I feel quite emotional now whenever, obviously, there's another report of another teenager losing their life when they've just finished their exams and they want to go out and have some fun with their mates. And I've probably become a little bit overzealous about it, if I'm honest, but the reality is these are preventable. These are preventable deaths. So very important. Thank you for the opportunity to share the information.
I want to, and I've said it 3 times, I'm going to be respectful of your time. I want a final 2 questions, if I could, please. You have demonstrated how incredibly busy you are. How do you manage your time? For people that are getting into these leadership positions that don't think there's enough hours in the day, could you give us a tip or a trick? How do you manage your time? You found time to speak to this random firefighter today, and you've justified it in your ever-growing list of priorities. How do you manage your time?
Not always as well as I should. Look, I think if you know what's important to you and what's going to make a difference, that helps. Because investing in things like this helps convey some messaging. And that's the important thing for me, rather than the talking to somebody. It's the, can you get some messages out there? What might an extra person listen to it? Might they learn something? So what I would say is I am blessed. I'm blessed with a great partner who understands the pressures of the emergency services. He was in it himself. I've had, between us, we've got 5 kids. They're not kids. We've got 5 adults that don't live with us anymore. And they were, I think you heard me say this at Women in the Fire Service at Development Weekend. At times, I thought I wasn't being the best parent, because at times, my time with them suffered for work, or being at something, a thing, because this is not a 9 to 5 job. Hey,
No.
It's
an all-consuming vocation.
Yeah, it is. But I am passionate about the things that I know bring me well-being. I love my garden. I love to walk. I love mountains. And when I do take time out, I probably take it, because I know I need equilibrium in my life as well. But I do work long hours, and I'll confess, there have been times where I thought, I'm gonna have to say no. I'm gonna have to learn that word.
Learning how to say no is a really powerful thing. It makes you feel like you're being rude, but also it does help people respect the value of your time. Sometimes it's a hard, egotistical, selfish, weird thing, but actually the way for you to be most effective and add value to the most people is a very difficult transition. I constantly get it wrong and try and get it right. And
but crikey, I'm more than halfway through my 50th decade, and actually, I think along those line journeys, you kind of learn to be a bit pragmatic about things as well. So, it's about making sure that you're true to yourself and fair with your family, because they're the thing that you need behind you all the time, eh?
Dawn, I've absolutely loved our conversation. You are so one of my favorite people. I've tried to get hold of you for the last 18 months, and it's a testament to your character and your values and your commitment, because you did make that commitment to me a long time ago, and we have nailed this. It would have been so easy and understandable and justifiable for you to not have been able to make time for this, because you're a very, very, very busy lady with a lot of important demands relevant to the safety of the public. And I really want to thank you for being so generous with your time today.
You're most welcome. I hope some of what we've chatted about is useful to people. And of course, I'm down here in Sussex, and if anybody wants to follow up on any of those particular subjects.
Sorry, how are you happy for them to contact you? Sorry, I nearly forgot that bit. What's the best way if people want to reach out? Is it LinkedIn, or how would you prefer?
Well, it depends what works for them, because I've got a LinkedIn profile. I'm active on Twitter, CFO, ESFRS. And also, I'm a public servant, so I share my work email, which is dawn.whittaker@esfrs.org. So if people can make their choice, but if people contact me, I always respond. It might not be immediately, and I have to confess, I just came back from holiday with an email in tray of just over 2,000 emails, so it will take me a while to wade through them. And
God.
some just need deleting. But anyway, so it's not always instantaneously, but as soon as.
But it sounds like you practice what you preach, because you are doing it in a beautiful environment. I've heard the birds chirping in your wherever your workplace is, where you are currently. So I think you've got that balance right as well.
Sussex is a beautiful county.
It is indeed.
You've got coastline, you've got the downs, you've got the Weald, you've got Ashdown Forest. Oh my goodness, Winnie the Pooh, and
you've got some good people by the sound of it. Some good first responders.
Fantastic people. Yeah, some great people on. I truly feel blessed.
Dawn, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to let you go and spend time with your loved ones, and also get back to the grind. And I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thanks, Pete. Bye-bye.
Firefighters podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continuing, please head over to our Patreon page, where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.